They ask why you are still alone, why you don't chase, why you no longer rush toward love the way others do. They assume something is missing, something broken, something incomplete, but what they fail to see is that nothing was lost. You simply woke up. The moment awareness arrived, illusion left. You stopped mistaking attention for affection and comfort for connection. Once you become spiritually awake, romance no longer looks the same. Words without meaning feel heavy. Promises without presence feel empty. You begin to sense intentions before they are spoken, and suddenly chemistry without truth feels like noise. What once excited you now feels shallow, and what once impressed you now feels performative. This isn't loneliness, it is clarity. You no longer crave to be chosen because you have already chosen yourself. You no longer accept love that demands you shrink, explain, or abandon your inner peace. Love didn't disappear from your life, it evolved. And today, we are going to uncover the quiet truth behind why spiritually awake people don't fall in love easily anymore, and why that awareness is not a weakness, but a silent form of power. Awareness removes illusion, why love changes after spiritual awakening. Spiritual awakening does not arrive gently. It does not knock and ask permission. It enters your life quietly, then rearranges everything you thought you understood about connection, attraction, and love. One day, you realize that what once felt magical now feels hollow, and what once felt exciting now feels exhausting. This is not because your heart has hardened, but because your eyes have opened. Awareness strips away illusion, and love built on illusion cannot survive clarity. Before awakening, love often feels like intensity. It is mistaken for obsession, urgency, and emotional chaos. The faster the heartbeat, the stronger the bond seems. Attention feels like affection, and consistency is confused with commitment. But awakening shifts perception. You begin to see that many relationships were not about love at all. They were about validation, fear of loneliness, or the need to feel chosen. When awareness arrives, those patterns become impossible to ignore. An awakened person starts noticing what others overlook. They hear what is not said. They feel emotional imbalance behind sweet words. They sense inconsistency between actions and intentions. This heightened perception does not come from judgment. It comes from inner stillness. And once you develop this awareness, you can no longer unsee it. Romance that depends on pretending, ignoring red flags, or suppressing intuition loses its power over you. Illusion thrives in unconscious connection. It survives when people are afraid to sit alone with themselves. Many relationships are formed not from love, but from the panic of emptiness. Awakening exposes this truth painfully. You realize how often people bond over shared wounds instead of shared values, over trauma instead of growth. This realization creates distance, not arrogance, but discernment. As illusion fades, attraction changes. You are no longer drawn to charisma without character or charm without depth. Loud affection feels performative. Fast attachment feels unsafe. You begin to value silence, emotional presence, and honesty more than dramatic gestures. This shift confuses people who are still asleep to themselves. They interpret your calm as coldness, your boundaries as distance, and your selectiveness as pride. What they don't understand is that awareness makes you protective of your inner world. You have worked too hard to heal your nervous system, to unlearn emotional chaos, to return to yourself. You will not give that peace away for temporary excitement. Love, for you now, must feel safe, grounded and real, not addictive or overwhelming. This is where many spiritually awake people feel misunderstood. They are told they are too much or too distant. In reality, they have simply stopped tolerating emotional confusion. They no longer chase potential. They no longer fall for promises without proof. They no longer romanticize inconsistency. Awareness has trained them to look beyond words and focus on energy, behavior, and alignment. The painful part is this. Awareness often leads to solitude before it leads to connection. When illusion dissolves, many existing relationships fall apart. Friends, partners, even familiar emotional patterns begin to feel incompatible. This can feel lonely, especially in a world that equates love with constant companionship. But solitude in awareness is not emptiness, it is recalibration. During this phase, the heart is not closed, it is guarded with wisdom. You are not unavailable. You are unavailable for confusion. You are not afraid of love. You are unwilling to repeat unconscious cycles. Awareness teaches you patience. It reminds you that forced connection always costs more than it gives. Love after awakening becomes intentional. It moves slowly. It does not rush to label or attach. It observes. It listens. It waits for emotional safety, not emotional fireworks. This kind of love is rare because it requires two people who have faced themselves honestly. And until that alignment appears, the awakened soul would rather be alone than pretend. So when spiritually awake, people say they can't find love anymore. What they really mean is this: they can no longer find love in places built on illusion. They are not unlucky, they are aligned. And awareness, once awakened, will never allow the heart to settle for anything less than truth. You no longer seek completion, the end of need-based love. Spiritual awakening quietly dismantles one of the strongest illusions about love, the belief that another person is meant to complete you. Before awareness, love often feels like a search for rescue, someone to fill the silence, soothe old wounds, and give meaning to your existence. This belief is deeply normalized, celebrated in stories and repeated in culture. But awakening interrupts it. You realize that expecting another human being to carry the weight of your emptiness is not love. It is dependency disguised as romance. As awareness grows, you are forced to sit with yourself in ways you never did before. You face your fears without distraction. You confront loneliness instead of escaping it through attachment. You learn how to regulate your emotions rather than outsourcing that responsibility to a partner. This inner work changes everything. When you no longer need someone to survive emotionally, your standards rise naturally, not out of ego, but out of self-respect. This is where many connections fail. Need-based love thrives on imbalance. One person gives, the other leans. One feels whole, the other feels held together. But when you are no longer seeking completion, these dynamics feel uncomfortable. You sense when someone is drawn to you not for who you are, but for what you provide: validation, stability, emotional regulation, or identity. Awareness makes these patterns impossible to ignore. People who are still searching for themselves often feel unsettled around someone who has found inner ground. Your independence is not loud, but it is confronting. You do not chase reassurance. You do not panic in silence. You do not cling when distance appears. This calm is often misread as emotional unavailability, when in truth it is emotional maturity. An awakened person no longer enters relationships to escape themselves. They enter to share, not to survive. Love becomes a choice, not a necessity. And while this sounds healthy, it drastically reduces the number of available partners. Many people unconsciously want to be needed, not met. They want to feel essential, not equal. When you no longer seek completion, you remove yourself from these dynamics entirely. This shift also changes how attraction works. You are no longer drawn to intensity born from insecurity. Emotional chaos no longer feels romantic. Dramatic highs and lows feel draining rather than exciting. You begin to crave steadiness, emotional responsibility, and mutual growth. Unfortunately, this kind of connection requires self-awareness from both sides, and that is still rare. There is a quiet grief in this stage of awakening. You realize how many past relationships were built on mutual lack rather than mutual love. You see how often you accepted less because you were afraid to be alone. And now, standing whole within yourself, you feel the distance between you and the world of need-based romance. This can feel isolating, especially when society constantly tells you that love should be urgent, consuming, and essential to happiness. But inner wholeness brings discernment. You no longer confuse attachment with intimacy. You no longer tolerate emotional dependency disguised as devotion. You are not impressed by someone who cannot stand alone. You respect vulnerability, but you require accountability. You want partnership, not parenting. This clarity eliminates many options, but protects your peace. Spiritually awake people are often told they are too independent. In reality, they are simply no longer fragmented. They are open to love but closed to entanglement. They understand that two whole individuals create a stronger bond than two wounded people clinging to each other for survival. This understanding reshapes everything. Love, after awakening, is no longer about being saved or saving someone else. It is about walking side by side without losing yourself. It is about choosing connection without abandoning inner stability. Until that kind of love appears, the awakened soul waits, not in bitterness, but in grounded patience. Because needing love and choosing love are not the same thing, and once you know the difference, there is no going back. Depth becomes non-negotiable when surface-level love no longer satisfies. Spiritual awakening changes not only how you love, but what you are willing to engage with emotionally. What once felt acceptable now feels shallow, and what once felt exciting now feels empty. This is the stage where depth becomes non-negotiable. You are no longer impressed by appearances, charm, or carefully rehearsed words. You are drawn toward meaning, presence, and emotional truth. And this shift quietly removes you from many modern ideas of romance. Before awakening, surface-level connection can feel enough. Conversations revolve around routines, distractions, and shared entertainment. Emotions are expressed selectively, and vulnerability is often avoided. This kind of connection feels safe because it does not require inner exposure. But awakening invites honesty, with yourself first and then with others. Once you experience that level of inner truth, shallow exchanges begin to feel exhausting rather than comforting. An awakened person craves conversations that go beyond performance. You want to understand how someone thinks when no one is watching, how they handle silence, how they respond to discomfort, and whether they can sit with their own emotions without running from them. These questions are rarely asked in early relationships, but awareness makes them essential. You are no longer interested in who someone appears to be. You want to know who they are when the masks fall. Depth requires courage, and courage is uncommon. Many people are skilled at being interesting, attractive, or socially agreeable, but few are willing to be emotionally present. When you seek depth, you inevitably encounter resistance. Some withdraw, some change the subject, some offer intensity instead of intimacy. This is not because you ask too much, it is because depth demands self-examination, and not everyone is ready for that. This is where spiritually awake people begin to feel disconnected from the dating world. Fast attachment feels unnatural. Emotional games feel transparent. Flirtation without substance feels empty. You begin to notice how often relationships are built on distraction rather than understanding. And once you see this, it becomes difficult to participate without betraying yourself. Depth also means emotional responsibility. You are no longer willing to carry conversations alone, explain basic empathy, or tolerate emotional avoidance. You notice when someone is present only when it is convenient, affectionate only when it benefits them, or open only when it feels safe. Awareness sharpens these observations, not to judge, but to protect your emotional energy. This insistence on depth is often misunderstood. People may label you as intense, serious, or difficult to please. In truth, you are simply unwilling to invest your heart in something that cannot meet you at the level you live internally. You are not asking for perfection, you are asking for sincerity. You are not demanding constant vulnerability, you are seeking emotional honesty. There is also a loneliness that accompanies this stage. When depth becomes your standard, the number of compatible connections shrinks dramatically. Many interactions remain polite but unfulfilling. You may feel surrounded by people yet unseen. This loneliness is not a punishment, it is a transition. It is the space between unconscious connection and conscious love. Spiritually awake, people often withdraw during this phase, not out of bitterness, but out of clarity. They choose solitude over shallow intimacy. They prefer silence over conversation that feels scripted. They would rather wait than force chemistry that lacks substance. This waiting is not passive, it is purposeful. It is an act of self-respect. Depth, when it finally meets depth, feels different. It is calm, not chaotic. It does not rush. It does not impress. It resonates. It allows space without fear and closeness without control. This kind of love cannot be manufactured or rushed. It emerges when two people are equally willing to be real. So when spiritually awake, people say they struggle to find love, what they often mean is that they can no longer tolerate shallow connection. Their hearts are open, but their standards are rooted in truth. And once depth becomes non-negotiable, love stops being about finding someone quickly and starts being about finding someone honestly. Energy mismatch becomes unavoidable when awareness makes disconnection clear. Spiritual awakening sharpens perception beyond words and appearances. You begin to sense people rather than analyze them. Energy, intention, and emotional alignment become louder than spoken promises. This is the stage where energy mismatch becomes impossible to ignore. What once took months to reveal itself now becomes clear within moments, and because of this clarity, many connections end before they even begin. Before awakening, people often rely on hope. They explain away discomfort, justify inconsistency, and give chances based on potential rather than reality. Emotional intuition is overridden by desire, but awareness restores trust in inner signals. You notice when something feels off, even if everything looks right on the surface. This sensitivity is not paranoia, it is attunement developed through inner work. An awakened person can feel emotional availability or the lack of it almost immediately. You sense when someone is present physically but absent emotionally. You feel when attention is driven by boredom rather than intention, or when affection is offered without sincerity. These subtle cues are often invisible to those who have not done inner healing, but once recognized, they cannot be ignored. Energy mismatch often shows up as emotional friction rather than conflict. Conversations feel slightly forced. Silence feels heavy rather than comfortable. There is no obvious problem, yet there is no flow. In the past, this discomfort might have been ignored or romanticized. Now, it becomes a signal. Awareness teaches you that harmony is not created through effort alone. It requires alignment. This is where spiritually awake people are often misunderstood. They may appear to withdraw suddenly or lose interest without drama. In reality, they are responding to what they feel, not what they hope. They do not wait for disappointment to confirm what intuition already knows. Leaving early is not avoidance, it is emotional efficiency. Another aspect of energy mismatch is emotional pace. An awakened person moves slowly, not because of fear, but because they value clarity. When someone rushes intimacy, overshares without grounding, or seeks immediate emotional closeness, it can feel overwhelming rather than flattering. Awareness recognizes when speed is driven by insecurity rather than genuine connection. This sensitivity also protects against emotional inconsistency. You notice when warmth fluctuates without reason, when presence disappears after closeness, or when communication lacks rhythm. These patterns may not be intentional, but they reveal misalignment. An awakened person no longer personalizes this behavior. They recognize it as incompatibility. There is often grief in this realization. You understand that many people are kind, interesting, and well-meaning, yet still not aligned with you. Awareness removes the illusion that effort alone can create connection. You learn that compatibility is not about trying harder, it is about resonating naturally. This is why spiritually awake people walk away quietly. There is no need for conflict or explanation. The body already knows, the nervous system already responds. Staying in misaligned energy feels like self-betrayal, and awareness does not allow that. Energy alignment, when it happens, feels effortless. There is ease in communication, mutual respect for space, and emotional presence without pressure. There is no confusion, no need to decode behavior, no anxiety about consistency. This clarity feels unfamiliar at first, but deeply grounding. So when spiritually awake people say they cannot find love anymore, it is often because energy mismatch reveals itself too quickly. They are not rejecting love, they are rejecting misalignment. And in doing so, they protect their peace, their clarity, and the truth they have worked hard to reclaim. Love transforms, not disappears, the quiet evolution of the awakened heart. One of the greatest misunderstandings about spiritual awakening is the belief that it makes people incapable of love. In truth, awakening does not close the heart, it refines it. Love does not disappear, it transforms. What changes is the way love is experienced, expressed, and chosen. The awakened heart no longer rushes, performs, or clings. It becomes intentional, calm, and deeply aware of its own worth. Before awakening, love often feels loud. It thrives on intensity, urgency, and emotional highs. The fast connection, the overwhelming desire, the fear of losing someone. These sensations are often mistaken for passion. But awakening reveals how much of that intensity was rooted in insecurity rather than intimacy. When inner stability is developed, emotional chaos loses its appeal. Love begins to feel quieter, slower, and more grounded. This transformation often creates confusion. The awakened person may wonder why they no longer feel excited by what once consumed them. The answer is not emotional numbness, it is emotional maturity. You no longer mistake adrenaline for connection. You no longer chase emotional peaks that are followed by deep crashes. Love now needs to feel safe for your nervous system, not stimulating to your anxiety. An awakened heart values presence over performance. Grand gestures matter less than emotional availability. Consistency matters more than charm. You begin to notice how someone treats you when nothing is being gained, when there is no audience, and when life becomes inconvenient. This attention to reality, rather than fantasy, changes how attraction works. Patience becomes a defining trait of love after awakening. You are no longer in a hurry to define, label, or secure a relationship. You allow connection to unfold naturally. This patience is often misunderstood as disinterest, but it is actually discernment. You are watching how someone handles time, distance, boundaries, and emotional responsibility. Love, for you now, must prove itself through behavior, not promises. This evolution also brings a deep respect for solitude. You no longer fear being alone because solitude no longer feels empty. It feels restorative. You have learned how to sit with yourself without distraction, how to regulate your emotions without external validation. Because of this, love becomes an addition to your life, not a remedy for loneliness. The awakened heart also learns when to walk away, not in anger, not in drama, but in quiet understanding. You recognize when something is not aligned, even if it looks good on the surface. You no longer stay out of hope that someone will change. Love after awakening does not beg, chase, or negotiate self-worth. When love finally arrives at this level of awareness, it feels different from anything before. It does not consume your identity. It supports it. It does not demand constant reassurance. It offers trust. It allows both closeness and independence to coexist without fear. This kind of love grows steadily rather than explosively. Spiritually awake people often spend long periods alone, not because love has abandoned them, but because they refuse to return to unconscious patterns. They understand that real love cannot be forced, rushed, or fabricated. It must be met at the level of awareness where both people stand.